All right. So we are going to transition to a discussion panel at this time. I also want to just take a moment if folks want to move in and out of the space and also take in the film that we just saw together. Collectively, I know I was sitting in different places where I could feel breath and movement and sound, and we are all here together in that. So we can take a moment. Also, there are bathrooms in and around here if you need to take care of yourself. There is also a sensory room that is inside of the program on the website in Altra Hall. It's for folks that if you're feeling overwhelmed or want to get away from a space, it's down the way. The folks working at the Athena Film Festival can point you to it in a much better way than I can describe because I always get lost on campus. And with that being said, we're coming back here. Okay, so as I open up this panel, I am still Chris. Earlier, I mentioned I'm Chris. I am also still the Director of Applied Learning at the Athena Center for Leadership. As a Jersey native, a feminist scholar and practitioner, I am so pleased to share the stage with two wonderful panelists for what I hope will be, riveting, thoughtful conversation about Dworkin's impacts, legacies, the tensions, and the possibilities for feminist theory and what it means to build a feminist present. And before we start, and before I introduce the panelists, actually, I will also pay a special shout out. Nicole Melillo, where are you at? Associate producer, thank you so much for coming and being a part of bringing us this film together. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you. And after that shout out, I will start by introducing the panelists beside me. Farthest to my left is Rebecca Mark, who is the director of the Institute for Women's Leadership and professor in the Department of Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies at Rutgers University in New Brunswick. Mark is a scholar, a professor whose research addresses feminist Southern writing and cultural representations of trauma. At Tulane University, Mark was a founding member of the Deep South Regional Humanities Center, the founding director of the Newcomb College Institute, a posse mentor, the founding associate dean and director of the Center for Academic Equity, and the chair of the English department. She received the Public Humanities Achievement Award from the Mississippi Humanities Council for directing the Civil Rights Conference, Unsettling Memories, was the Weiss Presidential Fellow for Teaching in 2014, and the former Greenberg Family Professor in Social Entrepreneurship, actually not former, 2014 until present. No more. Okay, so former, I was right. Closest to me is Natalie Chara, who is a passionate sociologist, educator, and advocate living in New York City. She has spent her career working in the field of LGBTQI plus supportive care and in anti-human trafficking efforts, with an emphasis on restorative and intersectional work. Along with her nonprofit work, Natalie has taught specialized classes in sociology at various colleges. She has a master's in gender and sexuality studies from the University of Amsterdam and a master's and a bachelor's in sociology from our alma mater, St. John's University. We go way back. Currently, Natalie is the director of support services at the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender Community Center downtown. Welcome to our panelists. So, how things are going to go down. I have a few questions. I hope there is room if there are inquiries coming from the audience, but I will kind of start us off. And I actually discussed the film earlier today with one of the festival's photographers, Tiff Brown, who is snapping photos. And we were struck by the continued relevance of Andrea's life, the work, the issues that have driven her activism, the tensions around it. And to open our conversation, I actually wanted to ask both of you if you could share about your first engagements with Dworkin's work and what drove you to it. What impression did it leave on you, your work, and beyond?
Okay, I can start. Hi, everybody. I'm Natalie Chara. Thank you for having me today. So I remember Dworkin's work back when I was still in school, so around 2014, 2015, 2016, and I was working through my master's programs and trying to figure out in the overwhelming wonderfulness that is sociology, what exactly I would hone in on. And I remember having a lot of work in gender studies, sexuality studies, and a lot of work in violence and intersectional works and systemic oppression work that I came across this, and my eyes were the biggest I think they've ever been in seeing somebody write works that reflected exactly what I was leaning into, right? Exactly what I thought the coursework was bringing me to very organically, and felt very drawn to this work. And I was just talking to Nicole before we started about how, you know, school comes and goes, and then we move back into the world and the realities of, you know, being a human in society. And I put the book on my bookshelf and hadn't picked it up in a little bit. And when this opportunity came about, I looked over at my bookshelf, and there was the book, a little bit of dust on it, but what a beautiful moment for me to come back to it, pick it back up, and start to work through it again. So it's been a legacy for sure.
I came of age at the moment when Andrea was writing her most powerful books. I was 15 years old in 1970, and then as I was moving through high school and then into college and into college at SUNY Purchase with many strong feminists, and we were reading, and we did what we just was like the book of the month club. You were just absorbing these books. I can hardly remember reading. I just remember absorbing, and what was it we were going to read next, and who was it, and it was such a phenomenally powerful moment when language meant something, and language was our lifeline, and these women warriors were handing us a lifeline to what otherwise would have been a moment of extreme despair in breaking down boundaries and having our bodies assaulted for breaking down boundaries. And so I look to Andrea and so many other women as these warrior women who literally gave their lives to this. And that's a little bit hard for us to understand in a time of healing and self-care and all of that, that you would just give your life. And so I feel like I walk through life as, almost like this split where I'm the nice, professor and nice girl and director of an institute. And then there's the Andrea Dworkin and the Audre Lorde and the Adrienne Rich and the Brittany Cooper and the Roxane Gay, who I just had the pleasure of hearing speak this morning at Rutgers. And they are these warrior voices, and they hold our rage for us. And you cannot, I do not believe you can be a woman in this society of any age and not have rage. And so we can't make it through the day living in rage all the time. So we split off. We know how to be good girls, but they live it. And I look up to Andrea, and this film, thank you for the film. Thank you.
Did you want to add more?
Well, I've got 7 pages of notes, but no, I will keep quiet.
All right. I saw the movement. I was ready. So I actually want to contextualize this because what you just mentioned, right, was thinking about anger and violence, like the context of what that is, where the place for that can be. I think
I just want to separate anger, violence, and rage.
Yes.
And I think that the word I should have used is rage. And Brittany Cooper uses that in her book. And we saw Andrea distinguish between anger and rage. And she was made into a persona. She was a kind person, a loving person, a generous person who was made into this incredibly grotesque persona. And I don't want that to ever happen to one of our leaders again. And it happens every single day. So I just want to say rage.
Absolutely.
Rage. Yeah.
And I really like that underscoring, because in what cannot really be called post Me Too,
no,
it cannot really be called that. But in a time where discussions of violence, especially gendered violence, are not only fraught, right? We know that when people do speak and write, do work around, the persona, as you were just describing, is actually forefronted instead of the work. And so either in response to the way that you have grappled with Andrea's work in your own life, your scholarship, or Natalie, in your own career, where is this place for rage? Where have you seen it, either for you, for the folks that you work with, and any thoughts that we can start from that point?
So the work that I've done for the last few years has been working directly with survivors. So working with survivors of violence, crime, trafficking, domestic violence, all of it. And that is a weighty work that I've been doing, and the teams that I support doing the work. And it is an onslaught day after day. I remember somebody a couple of weeks ago saying that the work that we do is set up to fail every single time, because we work in the aftermath of what is the wave of violence and crime that we see everywhere, day in, day out, happening now, right? And having to constantly bring ourselves to a place where we not only can hold that weight for others, but can hold the weight for ourselves, has been powerful, right? And I really do think Dworkin's work, and her scholarship, her legacy has been, also about resiliency and the way we have to implement that day after day to be able to take on what violences, what systemic oppressions are occurring every day. And that has been powerful, because oftentimes the rage that we feel can't, it's our responsibility as, folks working in the field directly, surviving supporters, to be able to channel that in a way that makes us useful in these spaces. And then be able to figure out what our self-care looks like, what our healing looks like, be it diving more into the work itself or finding other avenues for it. But in some ways, it's almost like a division of the self, just to be able to maintain that strength. But I do find that the resiliency that she showed has been pivotal, and is something that I continue to remind myself of. Yes, women who have had to lay their lives on the line in a way that I don't necessarily have to today. But I continue to see the after effect, the waves of violence continuing to happen.
I forgot what the question. What was the question?
So really diving into the also you can talk about the lessons or the challenges emerging from the work as well, if you want to pivot in that direction.
I think what sometimes we don't realize is, and it's in the film so directly, is that we held each other up and we still hold each other up, so that the work you do, I hope I can hold you up, because that is weighty work. And the fact that I can go back to an office of 5 unbelievable women who are doing this work and joke and hold each other up. We have the Gloria Steinem chair at the Institute for Women's Leadership at Rutgers, and Roxanne Gay is in that position, and we try and hold her up as much as we can with her work. And Brittany Cooper is there, and we hold Brittany up because they are the face. I am not the face. I am the one behind who is got to be there to support. So I think it's really important. The lesson I've learned is you don't do this work alone, ever, ever. And for the next generation, everything I do now is for the next generation. And the only thing that I can say is, Andrea said it, she said, read my work. Read. When you read Intercourse, the book, it is not the fraught political battle that we hear. When you read pornography, it is not the fraught political battle. It became an important battle. Those battles are important. We don't all agree. We're never going to all agree. God forbid we all agree. We can't. And certainly the liberation of sex and sexuality and gender has been this unbelievably wonderful thing that's happened. But if you read her work, she's much closer to that than the media. And you see her just saying, that's news to me. I didn't know I'd written that. I didn't write that. So, and she's a very nuanced, very brilliant writer, nuanced, brilliant writer. So if you get a chance, read the work. And that's my lesson. And my lesson every day is every time I think I know somebody, I go back and read what they actually said. And Gloria, and V have taught me that, because they will constantly come back and they will show us what's the next step. We have to take a next step. What's that next step? How do we do it together? How do we come together? Everything in the world wants us to be divisive. And I keep saying, no more waves, the ocean. And literally, it's no more waves. We've got the ocean, this whole ocean this time, because the ocean is dying. I mean, metaphorically and really. So yeah, I think my biggest lesson is the less divisiveness and the more complexity, more nuance, more complexity, more variety, more diversity, but less divisiveness. So.
She was made into a cartoon figure when you see incredible. Like you made her so simplistic when she was so subtle.
Thank you.
And that is a great reminder that folks, if you are teeing up questions, please, you will have a chance. Please think now, and we're going to get excited. I have one more before I throw it out to you all. And the next one is the long one. So where we're going to go. Some of Dworkin's work, read or a version of reading, has been utilized to support what has been called carceral feminism, a term that can be attributed to Barnard's very own Dr. Elizabeth Bernstein, to describe feminist advocacy that enhances and increases surveillance and punishment through the criminal legal system. Likewise, her work has been used to justify the criminalization of sex work, among other issues relevant to race, gender, sexual minorities, trans communities. How can we grapple with the importance, the vigor of the work, of the meaning behind it, right? I don't think it is lost that important widely, the importance of really coming to terms with violence and the way that systems are set up. However, we still need to grapple with those tensions, and time moves on. What can we do about that? How can we center these divergent interpretations and do the work?
Well, I am going to let Natalie speak more about this because I think her work is more directly involved in this. I think that these challenges to Dworkin, the challenges to all of the work that, years and years of feminist work, they're good, they're healthy, they are what we should be asking ourselves. And so the conference at Barnard many years ago, known as the sex conference, is really, really important. So I never understood why healthy disagreement, even, really strong disagreement, even like being on two completely different positions, I think we are a strong enough movement to hold that within us and to see what she's given us. I think the movie does a good job of that. It doesn't directly address some of these very important issues, so I'd have to think a little bit more about that. Certainly the people who went against her had strong voices and really stated what needed to be stated at the time. And I respect that highly. And I learned enormously from them. So.
The work is challenging that Andrea Dworkin presents. It is something that existed and spoke contextually to a time period that is different. The manifestations of violence and crime are different in other ways today. But I think her thoughts and her words on the criminalization of sex work is something that I grapple with today, especially working in the fields that I work in, namely like the anti-human trafficking field, where the evolution of the field is actually moving towards a decriminalization of sex work and complete immigration reform to allow these tanglings that have happened with just bad sexuality, whatever that may be, have allowed this to persist. And that is not the case, I would argue. Maybe a controversial yet brave statement to say, but actually a decoupling of these in terms of the dialogue that we have around them, the conceptualization, and the ultimate practice of it is actually vital so that the work can be, so that we can understand violence in a way that is true violence, and then autonomy, empowerment, choice in other ways and allow that to have its stage as well. So that's, I think, a place where, while we can find rooting in, I think the final speech that we see at the end that Andrea Dworkin gave at the Men's Rights Conference, the very humble plea to ask for 24 hours where there is no rape is tiny. If you think about it, that is a tiny, tiny request that is made massive in the world that we live in, right? And so to that balance, needing to find that balance, and I think that's where the work can provide us some grounding to understand the violence part of it, and then help us move dialectically, right, and in dialogue towards a world where decriminalized sex work can coexist.
If I could, when you say dialectically, girl,
Yes. Yes.
re-say it.
Dialectically.
Okay. Re-say it. And then what do you mean by that?
Ooh, we'll open up that can. So specifically, right, the lens that I work in with the trafficking work that I've been involved in has a lot of ties to what we think of as modern day slavery. These kind of terms get attached to it. And actually, if you look through history and the significance of what has happened, I would actually argue it is not that. It is a different set of violence. It is a new manifestation in a new way, and to just constantly tie it back to some other form actually doesn't get the point across of what we're doing, right? And so when you work or look into these fields in at a very, very like word for word stage, you are looking at a powerful wording, right? And needing to break that down, and then distinguishing that yet again from what is decriminalizing sex work and the movement around that.
I would just add that something that has always been in me is our bodies are so defended. Our bodies, and I mean human bodies, are so defended, but especially women and trans bodies. And we have this sense of, what is sex work, or what is my choice, or what is, and I just wonder what a world would look like where all bodies were, certainly if that's the way we expressed ourselves, then, but the fact that there is money being made out of this that is not going often to the people whose bodies are on the line. So I'm always asking, whose bodies are on the line? And that, to me, when Andrea, I heard her today, and you hear everything different every day, but I heard her today, about the money, and that moment, that 1970s moment when, sexual liberation was, a historical moment defined in a certain way, and then people were making money off of pornographic images of women. It's different than what we're talking about when we're saying, I am a sex worker and I have the right to make my living that way, and I am proud, and I am, but what would a society look like? What would it look like if there was no patriarchy, if there was no male ownership of women's bodies, if there were not one day without rape? But there was no rape, there was no battery of women. And we're going to walk out of here, and right around us, there are hundreds of women being battered right here in New York City, and are facing exactly what she faced. So I don't want to get distracted. I don't want to get distracted. I want to accept, but I don't want to get distracted on that fact. And when I saw those girls taking that shower, that moment, when they were taking those showers and washing off, I remember when I was raped, and I remember that shower in my body. I remember just thinking, if I just took a long enough hot shower, and I was in that shower for an hour, and you know what? It didn't work. And so that's why I don't want to get distracted, but I want to hear all the voices, as did Andrea. So
Thank you for sharing, and also thank you for sharing from a personal place. Again, for everybody, we are in a personal place. So I'm just giving a moment for that. Now, Natalie, the next question, especially knowing your work, also knowing you, um, knowing the work that, and by the work here, I feel like we've been saying that around some of the advocacy efforts, the nonprofit paid work that you've been doing with different communities, with sex worker communities, with LGBTQ communities here in New York City and beyond. I think it's important also to contextualize when we're talking about challenges, because I want to be abundant and really center carefully that harm is on so many different levels. Could you talk about the potential implications of what it means when we are not doing uh, a really intersectional, an analysis that centers multiple different voices? What policies, here I'm thinking Sesta Fosta, or others, I want you to like speak on them. Like, what does an intersectional analysis let us do to do the work that we need to get done to get more free? What policies should we be thinking about? Should we be careful about and bring into nuance?
Sesta Fosta is atrocious if you think about it intersectionally.
Also, can you unpack it in a very clear, quick way?
Well, Sesta Fosta is one of the acts policy that shut down a lot of the back pages, the Craigslist, the ads where sex workers were able to advertise their services. And so it shut all that down. So basically overnight they went down, boom, boom, boom. And if they had thought about it from an intersectional perspective, from a decrim perspective, they would have realized that shutting down those sites was actually incredibly unsafe for women who were using those sites or for folks who were using those sites, right? And so now, instead of being able to kind of conduct business in a semi-transparent online platform where I can tell you what I will do, won't do, rates, where I can tell you who I am to an extent in a safe place, now I got to go back out on the street and be able to do that face-to-face with somebody. So the increase in violence has been massive from that, right? And so when we think about these policies that are being made that are not being made from an actual intersectional perspective, that aren't talking about race, aren't talking about ability, aren't talking about privilege, access, income, all of these things, education, all of that comes into it, right? Then we endanger the folks who are probably already in a very dangerous position in society, right? And so what we've done is actually put the power back in the oppressive, back in the violent, right? And that is an issue that we constantly face time and time again.
All right.
No need.
And I wanted to take a pause. Folks in the audience, I did promise a moment for y'all to be in conversation. So I'm just going to take a moment and look around. You can wave your hand at me like this, or just share a collective mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Breathe into the space a little. Hello.
So, I'm very interested in female politicians and some of we talked about sort of the way that Andrea was demonized or stereotyped, or, her words were sort of misrepresented. And, I also see that with women in politics and our female politicians. And I wondered if you could each share from the work that you've done. Could you share with us a story of victory or a story that has given you hope and uplift in the last 5 years? What's like a story you really love that would be good for us to hear?
Yes.
It's like you read my mind.
Hope, resiliency, celebration through the struggle is always important to remind ourselves. I can give you I'll give you a snippet of a story. I was working with a woman who was a survivor. She's an undocumented immigrant, was labor trafficked. And she told me a story about once being in the home where she was being kept, and the owner, her trafficker, was wanting to have drinks that night, wanting beer, and he was like, here, like, go get me beer, because he had already had a few and couldn't make it out there. And so she was like, okay, I'll go, right? And this is after a long time of being in this situation. And prior to this, he had taken her documentation, her paperwork, anything she had brought over from her home country here, which oftentimes gets taken by traffickers, right? And she was like, yeah, I'll go, but I need my ID. I need my ID, or they won't, because they won't trust me, right? They won't trust that I can buy alcohol. I'm not 21. And so she got it. And she told me how she went, picked up the beer, brought it back, and put her ID in the sole of her shoe. And she was like, I had to keep it. I had to get it back, because that was the one thing tying me. I couldn't get out if I didn't have this. And she put it in the sole of her shoe and told him that she didn't have it. She lost it on the way. And she was, oh, I'm so dumb, I lost it, right? And then she had her ID. And just that little story right there changes everything, right? That's the celebration that we need to find. That's where the rage that we all feel in the work that we're doing has a moment to breathe, so that we can remember human victory, triumph. Yes. So thank you for asking that.
And can I follow up? Are there any groups doing work or groups that you've been supporting through your work at the LGBT Center that you're particularly excited about the activism that they're doing about gender, sexual, racial justice?
Yes, there's a ton. Always take a look around. I think of the Black Travel Fund. If you find them on Instagram, they're phenomenal, because they do a lot. They are a very small organization that is less bound by federal regulations and grants. And they provide free transportation to folks of color and trans folks of color to be able to get them to their doctor's appointments, to be able to get them to their case management appointments, any type of like very practical things, and give them very much tangible money resources in their pocket for them to be able to continue surviving every day. So look them up. They're great. There are a number of them that I could pull up for y'all and share.
What's the name of it?
The Black Travel Fund, and they are out in Brooklyn.
All right, and I think I saw the notification. We have time, I think, for one more question. Hello. And if you wait for someone to bring you a mic, we'll make it happen for you.
Hi, thank you guys so much both for being here. I was just curious if you could talk a little bit more about Andrea's specific take on pornography, which I think is really interesting, especially as young people. We're the first generation to kind of grow up with ubiquitous digital porn, and Pornhub accounts for a significant portion of all web traffic. And I think that's really inflected contemporary college hookup culture and the kind of sexual experiences of young people today in a really impactful way. So I was curious if you could talk more about her particular arguments surrounding pornography and what your understanding of her work in that field might be. Thank you.
I think Andrea would not believe the world that you all live in. It would be unfathomable to her. And I think it is a very difficult minefield to negotiate, but you all have to do it. And so the whole, I do not feel that I have expertise to answer that. I would only be, just from the students that I work with every day and see what they're going through and how they're pushing back. And that's my success story too. Every day my students are so amazing, and I hear the work they're doing, the changes they're making. But it would be really interesting to me to track the money there, like who is actually benefiting from all of these social media medium hookup sites, etc., and what's actually happening on them. And I'd love to see the research on that. So,
Hi. Yes.
And to your point, that was a brilliant question, by the way. Thank you for asking it, and thank you for commenting. But I think that to Andrea's words, go back to the text, and I would actually encourage you to read pornography, to read intercourse if you haven't, because I think a lot of what her work can do, even though it is not time stamped in modern era, educate women on the emotional complexity and the power dynamics that come from sex in ways that they're not getting with their families, with their friends, with their peers. I think her words in her text can speak larger than anything that we all would be able, even Andrea with her own mouth could talk about it. So that would be the biggest thing I would say is, like, if you are inclined to learn more or feel empowered about this, she does offer in like words that can help teach you things that as women we like sometimes don't know how to, and societally don't know how to talk about.
Thank you. Thank you for emphasizing that. And I think one major takeaway to re-emphasize is to read, get intimate with the literature on your own, put it in conversation with the work being done, with critiques, with loving critique, with principled critique. And I think that can do some of in the film, so we can stop asking, why are we so slow? Doing the reading, being in community together will ideally make us move towards a world where we can say, oh, we're making leaps and bounds. We're moving towards somewhere great. And with that being said, I'm getting waved away. We are getting waved away, but thank you so much to our panelists today. And remember, there are more films, there are tickets. Have a great rest of your night.